All right.
Okay, we are live. Welcome to the first ever Big East Goes Bias Editors Podcast. We are doing this 2 days away from the Big East tournament, which begins on Wednesday. And here with us tonight is me, Chris Novak, your site manager and editor-in-chief of Bias. I'm joined by my four editors. We have Rob O'Neill, who's live in Columbia, Missouri. We have Pierce Roberson. We have Michael Murtaugh, and also Cam Newton. Yes, that's what his actual name is. We're not joking. We're doing it 2 days away from the Big East tournament, which begins on Wednesday. And here with us tonight is me, Chris Novak, your site manager, editor-in-chief of Bias. I'm joined by my four editors. We have Rob O'Neill, who's live in Columbia, Missouri.
All right. That's not me. I had it open in the background.
I was
Making,
going to say,
I don't know what's going on.
off to a
All
great
right.
start.
No, I was just making sure it was working, and it is. So,
All right, that's good. That's good.
yeah, should we just jump right in here?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay.
All right. I mean, it's probably best to start with all the award announcements, semifinalists, and stuff in the past couple days before we jump into any tournament stuff. Um, So yeah, it was a pretty big day. I think what we really should start off with is Chris Dunn not being named to the award for point guard.
Watch list.
Yeah,
Was a Kuzi finalist?
yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, are there really 5 point guards better than him in the country?
Yeah, that was pretty interesting to me. I can see the argument. I guess the guys who did get picked were, they're more well known nationally. But Chris Dunn is no doubt one of the best point guards in the country. So I was very, very taken back as to why he wasn't a finalist for that award.
No, I think it's a shock. Chris Dunn has come along so tremendously well within the past year from, an unknown with the surgeries and injuries he's had the last couple of years to being one of the better point guards in the country. I don't think it necessarily deters from what he did this season, but it's definitely a sham when you look at the point guards in the NCAA. Tyus Jones is one of the few that I could throw out there and say he's one of the best point guards in the country, but Chris Dunn being left off that, yeah, it's definitely a ripoff.
I don't know. I mean, I don't hate it. I'm kind of looking at the list right now. For people that don't know, the 5 finalists were T.J. McConnell from Arizona, Tyus Jones from Duke, Kevin Pangos from Gonzaga, Lon Wright from Utah, and then Fred VanVleet from Wichita State. I don't know, man. The only one in there that I really don't necessarily agree with might be McConnell. But I think if you kind of look at it, no matter, I mean, Dunn's been unbelievable this season. That's not being disputed. But I don't know. I think when you look at those 5, I don't hate him not being in that group.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. McConnell's been pretty good. Fred VanVleet's been pretty good. Tyus Jones obviously been pretty good. I don't know. Chris Dunn, I think, has been Providence's best player. He's probably going to be the only player from the conference that gets drafted. And you got to reward him, which they did. I mean, he was co-defensive player of the year, which is actually a nice segue. With Sir Dominic Pointer, but it's just, I don't know. I would have probably put Chris Dunn on the list.
I think the fact alone of Chris Dunn.
And the only detractor, I guess, want to go? That's fine.
Yeah, I think the fact that Chris Dunn finishing 4th in nation steals, 5th in assists, being tops in our conference, first time for a Providence player to ever do that, I think that alone should have propelled him into that category. But I don't think it's a big deal necessarily. I feel he's been racking up awards so far in the Big East. It'll only continue. He's definitely a front runner for Big East Player of the Year, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
No question about that.
Yeah, and the only downside to that I can see is one of the main reasons for not selecting him to this list would be is when you look at the other players that are on this list and you look at their teams, where they come from, many of these teams have been quite successful this season, and I think that obviously factors into a lot of the decision with how Providence's record has certainly not measured up, as we would say, to many of the other men who were on this list.
And real quick, Rob, you talked about Chris Dunn maybe being the only first-round pick or the only draft pick out of the conference, and that's saying a lot when we looked at coming into the season with D'Angelo Harrison and Sterling Gibbs and all these guys that could be drafted. Chris Dunn was completely off the radar, and how he's come so fast like a cannon. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I know Providence fans don't think he's losing. I know Mike got into it the other day with a couple of them. But really, I don't know if I'd stay if I was him. You know, you got Henton leaving, so is that team really going to be worth staying next year? I mean, yeah, it'll be his team, but he's losing a lot in just losing Henton.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of referenced it. There was a Providence fan the other day that was not necessarily too happy with me saying that Chris Dunn was probably going to leave. I think if you look at what kind of his history is, he's lost 2 seasons of his career to injuries. So if you look at him right now, it's one of those things where he's kind of running the risk of it. If he goes back, you don't know what can happen. So I think right now, this is probably as high as his stock is ever going to be. He's been tremendous this season. I think he should win Big East Player of the Year. I think he goes. I think this is the time for him to do it.
Yeah, and I know Draft Express today, they put out a mock, and they had him going to Dallas, which really would be a nice fit, because even if they do lose Rondo, which they might, really it's a guy like Rick Carlisle to be able to learn from right away, and to be on a contender more or less every year is big too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they had him slotted perfectly in that 24, 25 range because, you know, you're getting a lot of teams that could be looking at point guard help, and Chicago Bulls. But Chris Dunn, this is definitely the time for him to take his money and dip into the NBA. He talked about he's lost 2 years to injury. You always go when you're the hottest. Don't stay and try to win one for Coach Cooley. Take your money while you can and go to a playoff contender.
Yeah,
I think it's a good fit. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, even if he ends up in ends up in the D League or something, he's still making money, so which is obviously a much better situation than being in college, no matter what college you're in, I would say.
I think if you kind of look at where he could be most successful too, I think since he is still getting, I mean, this is his first full season in a long time, he is still kind of getting his legs under him a little bit. So if you look at all of the potential places for him to go, a playoff contending team is a pretty solid place to start. I think if you look at guys like Reggie Jackson that kind of came in a little bit more raw, you get in the right system and you kind of go from there. I really like him more on a playoff contender than trying to go to a place like Philadelphia where he's going to get thrown to the Wolves right away. I like him on a playoff team.
Yep,
all right. Yeah.
There.
But yeah, now moving on to Big East co-defense player of the year, Chris Dunn, like we talked about, and Sir Dominic Pointer, who probably could have won the award on his own. He's been probably the best defensive player in the conference by a wide margin. And actually, a lot of people were mad that he didn't make the All-Big East first team. I think he was only really good in conference play. Out of conference, he wasn't great, so I could see it, but definitely deserved to be defensive player of the year.
No, I agree with you there. He's one of the better all-around 2-3 players in the Big East. He's growing into his own. Think about this. A couple of months ago, the beginning of the season, we were worried if St. John's didn't have enough size on them. And, you know, we come to now, Sir Dominic Pointer is one of the better lockdown defenders in the conference. I would have picked him outright over Chris Dunn. But you look at what Sir Dominic Pointer has done with St. John's as a whole, getting them to this point, and they definitely look like a team that can get into the NCAA tournament and maybe win a game. With Sir Dominic Pointer there, Rasheed Jordan. Oh, ridiculous dunk. My goodness. I challenged Dana Green from the North Carolina Duke game a couple of years ago. Rasheed Jordan just threw it down on Enos the other day.
Yeah, that was a hell of a dunk down on him back in when St. John's lost up by the tune of 105 to 68, but there was that saving grace there, that ridiculous dunk.
It was kind of like the first half of the game between the Monstars and the Toon Squad. 107 to eventually.
Yeah, no, I was out for the second half of that game, and when I left, Villanova was up by I think 7, and then I checked it later. It's like, oh, they won by like 40, which that's not surprising. Villanova is probably as good as advertised.
Now here's a big question. Would you put Villanova, Villanova, a 2-loss team, from the looks of it, if they don't slip up, if they can get to the conference final? I'll say if they get to the conference final, they'll definitely be a 1 seed. But are we ready to call Villanova an elite team like a Duke, like a Kentucky?
I would definitely have them as a 1 seed as of now, because if you look at the current projections of who are on that 2 line, I don't think any team such as a Wisconsin of all the 2 seeds probably has the best resume. But even at that, I still don't think they have as good of an argument for a 1 seed as Villanova has built up throughout the bulk of this. There's no question that they've dominated throughout most of their conference play. Throughout non-conference play, obviously, they were undefeated going into that Seton Hall matchup. They've put in the body of work, and I think that so long as, like Pierce said, if they make the conference finals at least, even if that doesn't happen, I still think that they deserve that 1 seed.
No, I agree. I think if you kind of look at it, there's Kentucky's for sure in. They are going to be a 1 seed regardless of what happens in the SEC tournament. And then one of Duke or Virginia is going to have to lose, but one of those teams is going to be a 1 seed. So the ACC champ is going to get one in there too. And then kind of after that, you're going to look at whichever one of those teams between Duke and Virginia loses, Villanova, Arizona, Wisconsin, and then Gonzaga's kind of still in there too. So it's kind of, for me, I think right now Villanova needs to win. I think, Pierce, you're right. They need to win one game. I don't think they need to win the Big East necessarily to the 1 seed, but they can't get bounced right away and still hang on to it, because they're going to have to pay attention to what's going on in the Pac-12 tournament and the Big Ten tournament and kind of see what happens with teams like Wisconsin and Arizona that are kind of right there, and a bad loss could kind of put them up into the next spot. So.
Yeah, and I think, didn't they lose in the first round last year of the Big East tournament?
Did to Seton Hall.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Blame Gangsta Gibbs for that one. That was a great shot. But Villanova is one of those teams where there's not a number 1 star. Darren Hillard, you could say, because I have him pegged as a 2nd or 3rd team All-American in the entire country. But Villanova, they fly so under the radar because they do play in the Big East, and there's that bias against the Big East. Oh, it's not strong enough. Look. They might send 6 teams to the NCAA tournament. They sent 3, 4 last year. It's definitely an improved conference, and Villanova has owned that conference this entire season. So you have to throw them up as an elite team. Now, regarding that number 1 seed, yeah, I do believe that if they get to the conference final, you have to put them in there. Say if you lose to St. John's in that semifinal game. There may be a shot that, hey, in Arizona and Wisconsin can vault over them, but I don't see Villanova walking into Selection Sunday and walking out of Selection Sunday not a number 1 seed.
Yeah, with the case of all the 1 seeds, I think that Villanova is the most vulnerable as of now, for reasons like you were mentioning, that obvious, as weird as it sounds to say, the anti-Big East bias. And so I think that certainly plays into a lot of it, especially considering the body of work that Virginia has put in this year. Some point to that loss at Louisville. I mean, it's a road loss. They're shorthanded against a ranked team. I'll put it past them. like I said, I think Villanova has, of any of them, I think they have the slipperiest of the slopes to stand on, as for all the one seeds.
Yeah, and actually, real quick, while we're talking about Villanova, I'm going to go to one of the questions we got from Brent Becker. Outside of Villanova, what team is the safest bet to make a deep tourney run?
Ooh, jeez.
It's a good one.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, because there are a lot of good teams, but, I mean, matchups are obviously big, and I don't know how much I trust a team like, even, say, Butler, if they can't get their scoring going, or, St. John's if they get into foul trouble.
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of look at it, all of the teams that we could put into this in the tournament, I mean, I think it'll be 6. All of them kind of have some kind of glaring flaw other than Villanova. If you look at Butler, there's been games where Butler's offense just doesn't do anything. You can even go back. It started at the Maui Invitational when you look at that Oklahoma game. I mean, there's some games where their offense just disappears. And so, I mean, if that happens, I could see Butler just catching the wrong game and something like that happening. Providence sometimes has a tendency to rely too much on Dunn and Henton. And if one of them kind of gets shut down by a good defensive matchup, you never know. That kind of was what happened with Butler and Providence this past weekend. Henton kind of starts getting a little quieter, and then Providence kind of fell apart. And so that's tough, man. I don't know what my answer to that one would be. I other than Nova, I'd say maybe Georgetown's got the best shot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, DePaul's resume picked up a pretty good loss this week, considering how Illinois State's been playing.
Just going bracketology from today. I mean, Providence is facing Purdue, so maybe there. St. John's facing Dayton. I don't like that for St. John's. I mean, this will probably all change after the weekend, obviously. I probably would have to go with Providence over Purdue.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But, I mean, that's not a deep run. That's just them winning one game.
Now, I think I did not clearly hear the question at first. It was which team besides Villanova has the best shot at making a deep run?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'd have to say Georgetown on that one.
I would have to agree with Georgetown.
Yeah.
I think I have them predicted to win in that little, in the selections that Chris had us send out and stuff. I think I predicted Georgetown to actually win the Big East tournament in that.
Yeah. I mean, Georgetown in the tournament. Is Georgetown in the tournament, though?
That's a fair point.
But, I mean, if this holds up, they would play Oklahoma State, which not terrible, then Maryland or Yale. I mean, if they can get past those two and they do end up playing Kansas, I think they'd beat Kansas if Cliff Alexander's still out.
Oh, yeah. That is if Kansas even makes it that far. I haven't looked at the current bracketology, but they have not. They've been like the sick man of college basketball as of late. It's not been pretty.
And then actually, there was a second part to the question here. Who's the biggest threat to Nova in the Big East tournament? Now, for that one, I thought St. John's all year, but then Saturday happened. So that might have to be Georgetown, since they did already beat them down.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think if you look at Georgetown, they have so many dimensions. There's so many different things that they can do, and their role players are so active. They are the most well-rounded Big East team other than Villanova. And so if you look at the way that their freshmen have come on, they can get the ball inside to a big man like Josh Smith, but at the same time, you've also got a two-way guard like Devonta Smith-Rivera there too. So I think if there's a team that matches up best with Villanova, it's probably them. And then, yeah, they probably are the team that could make the deepest run other than Villanova.
Yeah, Georgetown is that next team. When you look at inside with Trawick and Josh Smith, outside DSR has been one of the best players in the conference. Also another candidate for Conference Player of the Year, in my opinion. Georgetown, a more well-rounded team, aside from Villanova in the conference. So those two teams, Villanova and Georgetown, could make a very deep run.
Yeah, this is the best talented team I'd say John Thompson's had in quite a few years. John Thompson the third, should I say? I would really like to see them do something finally, make it past a first round matchup for the first time in well, God knows how long. Um, and I think, as Pierce was alluding to, Devonta Smith-Rivera, he's fantastic, and we've been raving about him all season. And I think so long as he hits a stretch of good games, then they'd be set to go.
All right. Well, let's move on actually right to Big East Player of the Year, which it got narrowed down a little bit yesterday with the all Big East teams, but not much, as there ended up being 7 players in the first team. So I guess let's just make our picks, go with why, and go from there.
Guess I'll get this kicked off. I'm gonna go Darren Hillard. He's had such a great second half of the season, really pushing Villanova into that top tier status. There's a lot of guys that this award can go to. Chris Dunn would be my runner-up. LaDontae Henton, he's been the leading scorer in the conference practically all season, but Chris Dunn's made, like I said, 4th steals, 5th in assists. But I'm gonna give one to Darren Hillard.
Obviously.
Yeah. Hillard definitely is a good choice. I think the problem with Henton and Dunn is they kind of cancel each other out a little bit. And it could end up hurting them because the voters don't know which one to vote for. So neither of them. I think D'Angelo Harrison has a case too, but he hasn't really lit it up as Hillard's done, where he's been pretty much good across the board, like Chris Dunn. So I'd probably have to go. I did think Dunn or Henton up until last week, but I do think they're going to cancel each other out.
No, I think you nailed it right there, Rob. I know I wrote that feature a little while back. I've been saying it still. I think it should be one of those Providence guys. I think if you look at what those guys do, game in, game out, dominant every time. If you look at Darren Hilliard, he'll have games. I'm looking at his stats right now. He'll have stretches of 4 double-digit scoring performances in a row, and then just a couple quiet games. He'll go. He went 3 of 9 against Xavier about 2 weeks ago, 2 of 10 against Creighton 1 game later. So part of me thinks that it will probably end up being him because of the fact that Dunn and Henton offset themselves. But if you look at who's been consistently dominant for most of the season, I think it's those 2 Providence guys have been so good. It's just really easy to recognize a guy like Hilliard who's the best player on the conference's best team, and you really can't go wrong.
And I wish things had worked out better at Seton Hall this year, and because at that point I would think that we'd be adding Sterling Gibbs' name to this conversation. Unfortunately, we all are too familiar with what happened there, so I have to agree. It's got to be one of the Providence guys. It's got to be Chris Dunn in that situation.
Now, real quick, Rob.
Yeah.
When you looked at the Chicago Bears last year, 2014, did you think that there could be a bigger dumpster fire than that team? Seton Hall. It's a shame for Coach Kevin Willard. Quick kudos to him for what he did with Tyler Adams from Georgetown. That was a great job for what he did. But 20 and 30 in the Big East in his last 5 seasons. The free fall just came so quick. They were one of the best teams in non-conference play. And as soon after that Villanova victory hit, it just came crashing down. Isaiah Whitehead went down. The losses started piling up. Jaron Cena left. Seton Hall has just been a dumpster fire. This tournament, it's surviving events for them. They know that if they can win 4 straight, they get in. If not, this could be Kevin Willard's last few games at Seton Hall.
Yeah, definitely. All right, just moving on. Big East Coach of the Year. This one I think will be pretty easy, but we'll run through it.
I think it's got to be Chris Holtman.
Yeah.
To me, it's not close.
It's unanimous.
The only other name, even potentially in the conversation, is Jay Wright with how successful Villanova's been this season. But if you look at the situation that Chris Holtmann came into this season, I mean, Butler was not projected to be all that good. I know, Rob, you and I went back and looked at our projected records for them, and we were significantly lower than what they ended up coming in at. And I think the job that he's done with earning the players' respect and winning his guys over, the fans over, and the media over, to me, what he's done this season is unbelievable, and I don't think it's even close. I think he's Big East Coach of the Year.
It's such an admirable coaching job.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much nailed it. We don't even need to go any further on that. All right, Rookie of the Year. I think it has to probably be Angel Delgado. I mean, he leads the conference in rebounding as a rookie. And, I mean, he wasn't supposed to be the best rookie at Seton Hall, but here we are.
Part of me still thinks you can make a case for Trayvon Blewett.
Yeah.
Coming in, we all thought Whitehead was going to be the guy. I mean, he was the top recruit coming in. Talent-wise, he probably still is the best freshman. But he's had kind of a weird year. He got hurt, mid-season, came back, and then has kind of had some negative press in terms of him and Gibbs supposedly not getting along very well, and that kind of potentially contributing to their downfall over the last few games. But, I mean, Delgado, yeah. I mean, in one facet of the floor, Delgado's been unbelievable. I think if you look at what Blewett's done on a consistent basis, though, I couldn't tell you what the final look at it was, but I know at one point during the season he was leading that team in scoring. And so for a freshman to come out and start pretty much every game and make at least an impact on a consistent basis, I think Blewett's got a nice case for himself too.
Yeah.
I agree at that point. Blewett has definitely been tremendous for Xavier. He doesn't rank in the top 10 of any Big East category, which I find shocking. I'm going to give the edge to Delgado. With all of the turmoil at Seton Hall, he's kind of just stuck to playing his game. He's been a force in the front court for Seton Hall, leading the conference in rebounds, averaging around 9 or 10 points a game. He has a lot of room to grow there at Seton Hall. I'll give the edge to Delgado.
I have to agree with the Delgado factor as well, considering how Seton Hall is currently in its present situation. It's important that they obviously look to the future at this moment, and a player like him certainly is a bright spot for a team that is headed into a bit of a rough patch at the moment.
Yeah, and Blewett and Delgado were the only unanimous selections to the all-rookie team, so it will probably be one of them. I mean, the Georgetown freshmen were pretty solid all year, but it's got to be one of those two.
The Georgetown freshmen kind of have that same Dunn-Henton factor, too, where they can kind of all offset each other a little bit because they've all had different points during the season where they kind of broke out as the top freshman on the team, and then a couple of games later, another one of them would step up their game. And so, I mean, they've been tremendous. They've got a great young group to build around at Georgetown. But I think they kind of offset each other's chances a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right. I guess we can just move right to the Big East tournament now. Let's start with the teams that have the most to gain or lose in the tournament. And I think if you go with teams with the most to lose, it's probably Xavier, because I'd say they're the only one of the 6 teams that are still on the bubble. And if they lose Thursday, and depending if the bubble gets a little stronger, it's pretty weak right now, but if it gets a little stronger, they might end up in the NIT. And if you go with most to gain, probably going to be St. John's, just because right now they're projected as an 8 seed, and if they could get up to a 7 or a 6, they could avoid playing the 1 seed in the second game, which would definitely help them out, obviously, because I don't think they're good enough to beat a 1 seed. I mean, I don't know.
I have to agree with you on that. Georgetown looks to be one of the teams that has a lot to gain because they're a 6 seed currently on bracketology. But if I'm Georgetown as a 6th seed, you're not going to want to move into that 5 or 4 category because that's where the majority of all the upsets happen when you play those 12th or 13th seeded teams. Seton Hall has the most to gain. As I said earlier, you survive advance, you win those 4, you get in. As far as teams to lose, you're right. Xavier is that team. One loss could knock them back into the NIT. They were lucky they got the right chips to fall this weekend. Northern Iowa winning the Missouri Valley Conference being one of those because Illinois State nearly creeped in and they almost bursted the bubble. But having some Big Ten teams, Indiana, Illinois losing, definitely helped out Xavier. But they are the team with the most to lose going into this tournament.
I agree. To me, it's really interesting that they've got Butler first. I mean, you look at the history between those two teams. I know I've been inside a Hinkle this season when Xavier and Butler faced off, and the two teams, they don't really like each other. The fans don't really like each other. And there's something about those two teams that kind of have each other's numbers. That being said, too, I think Butler, obviously they don't stand a ton to lose. I think they're in no matter what happens this week. But at the same time, they're kind of all over the place on where they could fall seeding-wise. I think if you lose first round to Xavier, potentially then you could fall maybe to that 8 seed range. If you win the Big East tournament, then you could come in at maybe like a 3 seed. So they're kind of, I think in terms of seeding, this is a big week for Butler also. They're in for sure, but I don't think we necessarily know where yet until the events this week kind of play out.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, go to the question real quick here from Ricky Keeler. Who's the one guy from any team that can change who wins the Big East tournament this week? And for me, it's pretty easy. It's got to be Joshua Smith because he's so good, but he's always in foul trouble, and he really never gets to show how good he is. He's commanding. He's 350 pounds, he's about 6'10", and he's probably the biggest player in the conference. And if he can stay on the court, he makes Georgetown that much more dangerous.
Yeah, I like that. I think another one that could really swing, kind of looking at lists of who made some of these teams, a guy that I think could really swing a team to just an entirely different level is getting kind of some of that old Javon Pinkston back for Villanova. It's fascinating to me that he ended up as an honorable mention because, I mean, if you go back and look at what our original positional rankings were at the beginning of the season, I mean, we had him listed as the top guy at his position, and I think he's kind of fallen a little bit by the wayside compared to some of his teammates. And so you look at the guy who could really change things in terms of how serious of a contender their team can be. I think if we can get a little bit of that old Javon Pinkston performance back, that could be really, really big for Villanova.
I'm not saying they're a contender here, but I would just like to say I would like to submit Billy Garrett Jr. for this section. I think certainly he has proven himself very many times earlier in parts of the Big East play and throughout a bit of non-conference play that despite everything, he is a resounding force for this DePaul team, one that's very headstrong and able to just kind of be like their guiding light even when they are down and in tough situations. And I think, if anything else, that could propel them at least past the first round. I just want at least one Big East tournament win from them this season. That's all I ask for. And they're playing Creighton, so God, I hope it happens. But I think it would certainly rest on him if that is to happen.
I was one of the few people that didn't believe DePaul would finish at the bottom half. At the bottom of the conference. They finished 7th, so I should give myself a pat on the back for that one. But Matt Carlino, I'll go ahead and say Matt Carlino. I think he could be the catalyst to Marquette beating Seton Hall. And like we saw last year, you never know when you get into the tournament. And who knows? Marquette has some weapons. You got Dwayne Wilson, who is an awesome rookie, the top scoring rookie in Big East play. You got Matt Carlino. You got Luke Fisher, who I think next year can really take that next step to being one of the top 3 or 4 bigs in the conference. But Matt Carlino, his ability to take over a game, put you back into it. I'm not saying that they're going to upset Villanova. If they perhaps were able to, I wouldn't be shocked, because Matt Carlino is the type of guy that can make that impact.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think it's really sad that Matt Carlino is not going to be with this Marquette team next year, because it's almost too bad that we lost his last year of eligibility on kind of a lost season for Marquette. I love the way that guy plays. I love watching him play. I think that's a great point. If there's one guy that could swing his entire team, it's Carlino. He's fantastic.
Pretty much. All right, we were going to talk about the Big East tournament winner prediction, but we have something coming on that Wednesday morning, so I'm not going to.
Actually, real quick, if I can give another answer to that, you can throw Sterling Gibbs into that conversation as well, just because he is still the shooter that he was beforehand. Seton Hall has had that hiccup, but when you look at that team overall with Delgado and Whitehead, Sterling Gibbs still the leader of that team. He's done it before in the tournament. He could definitely do it again.
Yeah, definitely. I think you could put Dante Henton in there too, just because he starts going off. He makes it that much more harder to stop Providence. But we were going to go tournament predictions, but we will have those on the site Wednesday morning.
Yeah,
Can we talk about the all Big East teams?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I don't like Ryan Arcidiacono on the first team, like, at all. To me, it feels like a recognition for just the fact that he was on the best team. I think Ryan Arcidiacono, for his role, is fantastic. I mean, what he does for that team is great, but I'm looking at the guys on this second team list. I'm looking at guys like Carlino, and even the way that Pointer came on towards the end of the year, even Roosevelt Jones a little bit for Butler too. I think if you're going to recognize another guy from Villanova on the first team for that reason, I think Daniel Ochefu needed to be on one of these teams too. He was fantastic. He potentially was the best defensive big man inside in the entire conference. And so I don't know about how you guys feel about it, but I do not care for Ryan Arcidiacono being on the first team at all.
No, I mean,
Oh God, yeah.
I don't like it. It's 6 guards and a forward. I mean, I feel like, you could have put someone like Pointer, or there's a case for Roosevelt Jones if you have watched Butler all year. But, I don't like the 6 guards on there.
And that's what I absolutely hate. I think when we did our little editor roundtable thing and we discussed our picks, and all of us said that we hated the way that the Big East does this because it allows something like this to happen. You're talking about the absolute dominance of the guards. I get that it's a guard-heavy league, but good God, they're rewarding far too many of them in here. And of all the Villanova players that they could have added to this over Arcidiacono, there would have been quite a few other candidates. For me, I would have liked to have seen maybe a Matt Stainbrook pushed into the first team contention over maybe an Arcidiacono, but it's just a personal opinion of mine.
Yeah, that was ugly. That was ugly that Arcidiacono got in there. If you're talking about the 5 best guards, the 5 best guards are already on that list, and Arcidiacono, he's not one of them. You could easily throw Stainbrook in there, as you said. I think Stainbrook's the most underrated big in that conference. Ochefu, you could make a case for him. I'm shocked Pinkston was only an honorable mention, but Arch being in there as a first round, they need to change that up. First off, 7 guys got in. It shouldn't usually be 6. And the fact that they put in 6 guards was definitely a problem.
It kind of takes away from the prestige of it a little bit, too. I mean, if you look at between the 2 teams and the honorable mentions, 17 guys got put on that list.
It's like when you're playing
7?
Little League. It's like when you're playing Little League, and it's like, here, you get a trophy for playing. You all get trophies. Everybody
Yeah.
can't get a trophy.
No, I mean, 7 guys made the first team. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Was that 6 on the second team? 4 in the honorable mentions. I don't care for that. Especially with Archie Diacono again. I think he was much more suited as an honorable mention than to even be on the first or second team, I think.
Yeah, it really is unfair in a way, the fact that they do it that way. I think it's extremely hard and confounding to try and compare a center and a guard and whatnot, and especially in this league where there's such a great competition among all of these guards. And at that point, they have to winnow through and pick about 2 or 3, because it's doing a gross injustice to all of the big men, your forwards and whatnot, who are also competing at such a high level but aren't getting recognized simply because scoring numbers and other things among the players that we have mentioned who are listed are much higher. And
Yeah, definitely. Now just looking at the conference as a whole, the entire season out of conference two, who do you guys have as the biggest surprise and disappointment this year? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious each way, but at least disappointment is obvious. But let's hear from you guys.
so,
I think no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can DePaul count for both?
Yeah, no, they were a disappointment really in out of conference, and then they became a surprise in conference, and now they're right back where they usually are.
I was going to say Seton Hall for both. To me, it's both a surprise and a disappointment to see what has happened to that team. Because I think you're right. I think if we had voted on Big East Player of the Year 2 months ago, Sterling Gibbs probably would have been the front runner. And then now you look at the situation that they're in, and their coach is about to potentially lose his job, and probably should. To me, they're surprise and a disappointment at this point for me. I did not think that this was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you can make a case for Butler being a surprise too, because no one thought they were going to be quite this good, but it is definitely probably Seton Hall or DePaul.
It's such a sad situation with what Seton Hall was going through. We mentioned there were so many auspicious signs for them earlier in the season, indicating that they would have this nice run. The first team to beat Villanova, all this different stuff, and then they come out, all this different infighting, the whole situation with Ryan Arcidiacono and Sterling Gibbs, and it's sad to see how that's gone. And then I would also pose to the DePaul issue, though. It was surprising at first, and then obviously the drop down was even harder after how successful they were. I would have rather just assumed that they'd been bad all season long if they were going to do that.
Yeah, DePaul was kind of that Cinderella for a couple of weeks, who lost their slipper, and then for the rest of the movie just continued to be horrendously bad. But it's got to be Seton Hall. For Seton Hall, it just came so quick. You get to that point where they were awesome in non-conference play. Sterling Gibbs, in my mind, would have been Player of the Year if we had done this 2 months ago. Thank God we didn't. You look at them now, seeing after that win over Villanova, how it just came crashing down so quickly. The stuff between the stuff between Jared Cena and Isaiah Whitehead's posse, racial tension, and with everything going on right now in the world, that just came at the most inopportune time. Cena leaving, and then just an awful elbow from Gibbs to Arch. It was just one thing piling on to the next, and it's ultimately going to cost Kevin Willard his job. So I would say Seton Hall.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much in agreement there. We have one more question, and then I think we're about done. Just looking towards next year, the Big East, will they be better or worse as a whole than this year? Um, there's a lot of really good recruits coming in. Obviously, Villanova isn't losing that much, plus Jalen Brunson. Marquette and Creighton have top 5 classes. Butler's not losing much. Um, Providence might take a step back. Georgetown has a lot of good stuff coming in, and Seton Hall and Xavier.
Paul.
Yeah, and Seton Hall and Xavier, we don't really know for reasons, but I would say they'll be better. I don't know if they're gonna get 6 teams in next year, but I think just as a whole, it'll be better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Marquette, they've got a great class coming in, and a lot of their role guys are going to be a year older. They're a team that most definitely will be back in tournament discussion next year. I think Butler's another squad too that I think could be good next year. If you look at who they're losing senior-wise, they're going to lose Alex Barlow, they're going to lose Cameron Woods, but at the same time, they've got Tyler Lewis, who was a transfer from North Carolina State, coming into the starting lineup next year. He was a McDonald's All-American coming out of high school, one of the best passers in the ACC when he was at NC State. I think he could be a really good piece next year. He's going to be a guy that we're going to be talking about, so I think Butler will be right. It's a give and take in terms of who they're going to lose, but I think people are replaceable there. I think they'll be right there next year too.
Yeah, the good teams will stay good. They'll obviously reload or mature, and the teams on the bottom of the league are certainly going to improve as well, like you mentioned with Marquette's recruiting class. Billy Garrett Jr. is going to be another year older for.
I'm gonna go. I'll
Odd to see him since
next season.
Yeah.
When it comes to Marquette, like Mike said, Marquette's guy is going to be a year older. Me being a Duke guy at heart, and Woj being there, I think Woj had a good first year. He had his trials and tribulations. He's only going to continue to get better. Coming from that Coach K school of coaching, we're talking about Bobby Hurley. He's got a chance to take Buffalo to the NCAA tournament. So Woj has learned a lot in his time at Duke. I think Marquette will be better. And then Villanova, they're losing some guys, but they're just going to re-up. Jalen Brunson, who's from the Chicago area, is a monster. He's one of the next big prospects to hit the NCAA. I think the Big East, they got a lot of slack, though, over the last couple years for losing teams and for not looking strong enough on paper. But if you pay attention, the Big East has been one of the top 2 conferences, in my opinion, overall this year.
And they're only going to get better next year, too. I agree.
All right. I think we're about done here, unless you guys have anything else you want to bring up while we're here.
No, that's it for me.
All right. I don't really have a closing speech prepared here. Chris had one, but he lost his internet about 15 minutes, so I think this went well. We might be back for one during the tournament at some point, if it all works out. And we have a lot of good stuff coming between now and the national championship, so you can just come back every day, keep checking out here, and for everyone at Big East Coast Bias, we are signing off.